What's up, Pinoy Cinephiles? Welcome to our part 1 coverage of Pista ng Pelikulang Pilipino 2020 held digitally on the FDCP channel website. I'll be putting the link on the description box below. If you click on that link, you're going to see the different ticket prices, the movie screening dates. I'm telling you, it's going to be worth your while because apart from the main showcase films, you're also going to have access to the films from the past local film festivals, and that includes the documentaries, the restored classics. The festival runs from November 20 to December 13, 2020. So that's 3 weeks, so plenty of time for you to watch. And I hope you guys do check it out. But first, before I begin my review, why don't you guys please do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button for weekly reviews of movies, TV shows, and video games. Okay, first movie natin ay He Who Is Without a Sin, written and directed by Jason Paul Laxamana. First off, I've got to say this movie has the best poster out of all the films in this film festival. And upon watching the movie, it actually turned out to be different from what the trailer suggests, which actually can be deceptive. So there's a little bit of betrayal whether the movie actually turned out good or bad. I think it's going to have mixed reception on the audience. This movie is about journalism, specifically on media, on the different facets of truth and perception, on how one's perception changes depending on what person wants to believe. We have here Elijah Canlas playing Martin. He's an AB communication student and he looks up to this reporter, older but still young, named Lawrence Manalastas, played by Enzo Pineda. I'm not going to divulge much of the plot, but let's just say that this movie takes a lot of shocking twists and turns. There's going to be a retelling of an account, 3 times to be exact, coming from the same person, and it's all going to be contradictory, so that in itself creates an unreliable narrator. And I did not expect the non-linear storytelling. I think the director made it in such a way that it's going to be gripping and compelling. My attention was hooked all the time. On the other hand, however, looking at the bigger picture, there's a sense that this could have worked as a short film, that the narrative is stretched in this 80-minute mark because it keeps on retelling the events, but it's never boring for me. And with every version of their story, there's going to be new pieces of information, lurid details, which kind of shocking to the senses. I guess I'm gonna talk about the themes that were tackled in this movie. There's gonna be themes about sexual harassment, sexual abuse, which actually can be a blurry line nowadays because anyone can be a perpetrator and anyone can be a victim without actually realizing here. So one character here learns the harsh truth in a hard way, and there comes the moment of self-blaming, because when we idolize someone, we tend to put them on a pedestal, not judge them on the same moral grounds, not treat them as our equals. So there comes that perceived reputation and credibility, and we tend to diminish our value because of that perception that the public has. But in truth, these people are also humans who have the capacity to do a lot of vile things, so we need to call them out whenever they have done any malicious acts. I think this movie also have an undertone of machismo, how we tend to cage ourselves, especially for males like us, how we tend to cage ourselves into that construct in the effort of looking cool, not realizing that we are actually sacrificing our dignity and some part of us in the process. It also talks about how victims process their trauma, because when you're in that situation, when you find yourself locked, the tendency is really to get shocked. And I don't think a lot of people will realize it, but that's what's really happening in real life. One can say that this movie is being exploitative because there are a lot of shocking moments that happen throughout, and sometimes it's just done for the shock factor, and this movie actually ends on such an abrupt note. So in fact, it's more on dipping on the issues, not actually confronting them. Though one can make a point that this movie reflects reality, a time where predators can roam around free, go unpunished. That really happens in real life, but I wish that the filmmaker took a more definite stand here, because this is such a sensitive issue, and to remain indifferent throughout the movie is kind of insensitive. I'm not really asking the movie to have a redemption arc per se, to have its justice delivered, but I want it to take the issue to a more thought-provoking level and not just disorient its audience, because that is one thing that this movie successfully does. was. And after that, it kind of abandons the plot, that it gives the impression that everything is just done for the shock value and there's no actually bite. On such a should have been politically charged movie, so I think that's a missed opportunity on that. Actually, after watching this movie, I'm still kind of on the fence if I actually like it or disliked it. But overall, the decision to cut the movie short just when things are about to get interesting is actually a bad part, because it leaves the characters hanging. They don't feel like they already have their full arcs here. In terms of performances, Elijah and Enzo are really committed to their craft. They have really sunk their teeth into their characters, and more often than not, they actually put more depth and nuance to the movie than what the screenplay suggests. So I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 5 stars. Next movie we have is Metamorphosis, directed and co-written by J.E. Tiglao. This is one of the important films that came out in last year's Cinema One Originals Film Fest. This tells the story of Adam Bonifacio, played by Gold Azeron. He's an intersex, and when we say intersex, we're referring to people who we cannot instantaneously classify as either male or female because of the presence of two genitals. I think another term that is being used is hermaphrodite, that however seemed to have a derogatory connotation on the past, so I think the more acceptable term now is intersex. I think this is the only local film that we have in our country, and frankly, the only film that I've seen tackling this condition. So it's very important to me to have this underrepresented segment of society have their story told, because they are often ridiculed, be the source of the laughing stock. And I think that's one of the power of cinema, to give voice to the minority in a way that it will help us broaden our horizons, our perceptions, because this movie is set in a milieu or a time where people have limited knowledge on this condition, and they tend to have shallow perception and low level of acceptance within the community. Adam in particular here lives in a devout Christian family. His father is a pastor and his mother is an illiterate wife. At the beginning of this movie, he identifies himself as male, and as we go through this journey, we're going to witness all the psychological and physiological changes that he will undergo. So this is a coming of age movie, but with a twist, because apart from the sexual awakening, the main character here is also confused on his gender. I think Adam also mentioned something on the trailer that if he falls in love with a girl, does it mean that he's lesbian? Or if it's a guy, does it mean that he's gay? So he doesn't know what category should he place his or herself into, and to feel all those external forces prompting him to make a decision, if he has the right to make a decision in the first place, because he lives in such a conservative family, and this is one of the scientific conditions that I don't think that the doctrines of the Bible has a firm stance on it, I think. And you know, going one way or the other might contradict his beliefs and his upbringing as a Christian man. Apart from the religious guilt, the film also explores the family dynamics, the social dynamics, on how knowing this issue will affect on the life of Adam. One thing that I can commend about this movie is that it is handled with sensitivity, and paired that with the cinematography of Tiglao, playing with the aspect ratios, all these bright colors. I think it's an aesthetically pleasing film to watch, even though at times the messages of love and acceptance can be on the nose, all these metaphors, a lot of them actually, and some of them can use a little more finesse in delivering those symbolisms, but still it gets the message delivered, though not in the most efficient way, but still in an effective way for me. It also has the tendency to be melodramatic, a formulaic comic of age story, but I like that the movie does not demonize any of its opposers. Like, it's an awareness passion project that helps the parents to understand their children more, not only for those who have the intersex condition. Gold Azeron bagged the Best Actor award here for the Cinema One Original Film Fest, and he deserves it because of his brave portrayal of imbibing all those anger, the angst, the confusion of having an unlucky draw on the genetic pool. It's a delicate and naturalistic performance. He bears it all figuratively and physically. Also, Yayo Aguila here won the Best Supporting Actress role for the Gawad Urian. I think she really shines in these maternal roles. Her character here is one of the positive anchors that Adam can rely on. The third act could have been handled better, however, because there's some deus ex machina na involved in there. Certain character changes his stance on the issue, and I think that the transition can be a bit abrupt. But in terms of bringing this metaphor of a butterfly, of having this process of metamorphosis akin to the lives of a human, to the coming of age story that we have here, that young people are like caterpillars, that over time they grow into something bigger and more proud, that they can shed all those backward beliefs and embrace themselves, embrace their sexuality, and in this case their gender. So even if the screenplay can be clunky and some of the acting here is actually a bit cringy, it's hard not to love this movie because we don't really get much stories about teenagers grappling on their sexuality and gender at the same time. To have a character here that has shown willingness to embrace the consequences of his changing body, but does not necessarily have the ownership of doing what's best for his body. I think the movie ends on a graceful note. It's lyrical and beautiful. It just embraces you into its loving and accepting arms. I'm gonna give this movie a 4 out of 5. Next up, we have Sila-Sila, directed by Giancarlo Abrahan. This one also debuted in last year's Cinema One Originals. It talks about the complexities of gay relationships today, what it's like to be queer, and what are the interior realities involved in keeping up with these gay relationships. In here, we have Gab, played by Gahol, who's forced to confront his past ex-boyfriend, Jared, played by topper Fabregas. We first witness their breakup in the first moments of the movie, and then flash forward to the reunion scene where they are forced to face each other again. This movie won the Best Screenplay Award in the Cinema One Originals, and true enough, the strongest asset of this movie is its screenplay. And the way it's executed, it doesn't feel like you're watching a movie. It feels like you're just watching real life. The way they delivered their lines, helped by the theater actors, because they did a lot of long take shots here, and it really helps that the actors here are well versed on their timing and position to nail those scenes. I read from a CNN article that this movie is written by a gay man, directed by a gay man, and played by gay actors. So this movie definitely knows where it's coming from, and it shows because it has all the sensibilities of a modern gay relationship. The way the director handles the breakup scenes, the love-making scenes, which can be a bit uncomfortable for those who have conservative minds out there. It does not feel sensationalized. It just looks like two people who keep falling in and out of love of each other, loving and hating each other for the same reasons, because what we don't understand is that relationships in the queer community is much harder, much complex, looking from an outsider's point of view, because they have such a tighter circle here, and at the times the movie feels secluded, like you're just watching from the fringes and never really personally relating to them. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, being part of the straight audience, but you know, this movie is very entertaining and humorous. Most of it comes from the supporting characters. We have here Palmos, who I first saw in Huling El Bimbo, the musical. I know the comedic talents of this person, so it's fun to see this character grace the screen. Also, Dwayne Baltazar in her debut role. She's the writer and director behind great films like Oda sa Wala and Gusto Kita with All My Hypothalamus. I didn't know this person can act, so it's a wonderful addition to her resume. Actually, everyone in the cast here, down to the minor roles, are very excellent in portraying their roles. It feels like they're portraying themselves. It looks like they're just having fun while doing it. We had a lot of fascinating interactions. It's mumblecore cinema at best. Everything feels candid and frank. It's quite mundane but involving. It's quite repetitive, but in the best possible way, because it's just so fun to hang out with these people, even though you can't really personally relate to them. I guess the biggest task of this movie is to bridge all those sensitivities from a specific audience to a much wider audience, and I think the whole movie is a frank and unfiltered depiction of gay relationships without being done in a poor and tasteless manner. I love that the movie does not glorify its protagonist, and Gahol really gets into the skin of his character, all his anxiety, all his fears, all his reluctance of getting in and out of the same relationship. And the same can be said for topper Fabregas. Together they make this dynamic duo. I think there's a fun commentary to be had here, because in life, if we keep on doing the same mistakes over and over again, if we don't clean our act together, we find ourselves in the same situation over and over again, and I guess that's life. Ultimately, I don't think this movie will completely speak to a much wider audience, but it's just so fun to have another take on the LGBTQ subgenre, that it's just not about coming out of the closet story, that it accepts these people in a modern world where there are a lot of progressive characters. This movie emulates life in the best possible way. It's fun, it's candid, it's simple. I'm going to give this movie a 4 out of 5 stars. And that's it for our part 1 coverage of Pista ng Pelikulang Pilipino 2020. Have you seen these movies? Let me know what you think in the comment sections below. Stay tuned for part 2 as I will be joined by Phil in reviewing more films, Kintsugi starring JC Santos, Q Cinema 2019's Best Picture Cleaners, and Mike De Leon's restored classic Batch 81. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button and subscribe to us for weekly content. Till then, see you on the next one.